Inga mana, inga reo, inga rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai e te whānau. Aroha ki te au, aroha ki te titiriti o Waitangi. Tēnā rā koutou katoa, tihei mauri ora. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everybody. It's great to see everybody return, looking refreshed and looking fit to start 2024 with a hiss and a roar. Can I welcome our visitors? Great to have our community in the chamber today, and we look forward to hearing from you with our first item. Welcome back to all our staff. Thank you for those who worked through the Christmas holidays. I know a great deal of you did, so we acknowledge your hard mahi through the holidays. It is now also, as we celebrate our Te Tiriti o Waitangi on Tuesday, to acknowledge the treaty. And as we all today acknowledge partnership, we acknowledge participation in everything we do, and we acknowledge the protection of our whenua. Kia ora. I'd like to invite now our lovely Jill McDonald from St Andrew's Presbyterian Church to open us with a karakia. Kia ora and welcome, Jill.
That life is so hard on so many fronts in our community, in the world, and at St Andrews we're really conscious of that, and we're focused on leaning into God, and that we need to create practices to do that. And the one that we're focusing on currently is gratitude, and so today's prayer is one of gratitude. Kia ino e tātou. E tau mātou matua e te rangi kia tāpu tō ingoa. As we come before you today, O God, we come with gratitude for all that you are, for all that you have created, and for the abundant and full way of living that you long for all people and for all of creation. Here in this chambers today, there are people for whom faith in you is foundational, through to those for whom you rate no mention. Wherever we sit on that spectrum, however we may or may not practice our faith in you, may we recognise the significance of this space of thankfulness. E hoa atua, we thank you for the plains of Heretaunga and the wonderful maunga that frame this beautiful rohi, for the many rivers that wind their way through this district, the Mohaka, Naruroro, Tukituki, Tutaikuri, and the Mokutuararo, along with the lakes Tutera and Opoahi, giving life to so much. It can take our breath away to see the way the evening light falls upon Mount Erin, or the vivid blue of the Pacific Ocean as we marvel at all you have created and are continuing to create. We thank you for the people of this whenua, Ngāti Kahanunu, whose roots are so deeply embedded in the soil. And we thank you for those who have come and been welcomed from afar, from Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands. We are so grateful for the founding covenant of our nation, Te Tiriti, that sets out the promises of partnership that we are all called to live into. May your wairua tapu guide and strengthen us to do just that, and to diminish the voices that seek to undo this treaty. There is so much in this community to be thankful for. The people who do so much to care for others as well as the environment, organisations like Nourished for Nil, the Connect Community Trust, One Voice, Christian Love Link, Resource, all of the community hubs that arose out of the cyclone. We thank you too for gingers in the stings and all of the other hair colours too, and the no hair folks as well, that together we make up a gloriously hued Heretaunga. As this Council of Heretaunga Hastings meets today, O God, we give thanks for the Mayor and the councillors, for the CEO and all of the staff. We are grateful that their focus is the flourishing of all of the people of Hastings. We thank you for the gifts that they bring to the table to enable Here Taonga, the whole district to thrive. May they each know your love and embrace as they meet today. E roto i te ingoa o ihu karaete. Amen.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui. Thank you so much, Jill, for that lovely karakia. Just working through apologies and requests for leaves of absence. We have apology from Councillor Nepi and no other apologies. Any leave of absence? Councillor Heki.
Your Worship, I'd like to seek leave for Thursday the 15th and Thursday the 22nd of February.
Thank you, Councillor Heki. Any other leave of absence? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Worship. Leave from the 11th to the 15th of March, please.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to seek leave for the 2nd to the 11th of February, please.
Thank you, councillors. I will come back to you, Simon, and confirm whether that leave
May
has been
28,
adopted.
June 10.
June 10?
Yeah.
May 28th.
From
June
May
10.
28th, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. And I'll come back to you with confirmation on that leave of absence requested. Thank you for that. I'm happy to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Watkins. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. We're very warm welcome to Councillor Dixon, who is joining us today via Zoom. And we also have some members of our staff, Gus Chartras, who's been working in the voluntary buyout office and leading that, and also Craig Cameron, one of our group managers, and also Asher Davidson, who's been working on all of our legal matters through the voluntary buyout process. Welcome to Jim. There, we can see you there, and Jim has also been helping us with policy for the voluntary buyout process right from the outset. I just remind councillors, if they wish to declare a conflict of interest, they may do so now or as the item arises. I'll start with Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Andy and I may consider doing a subdivision, I would rather declare a potential conflict of interest and step back from the table for proposed plan change 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to declare a conflict of interest to the amendment to Category 3 buyout policy.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. So we don't need that moved, and now we move on to item number 5. So we've got a confirmation of minutes, thanks, from the 14th of December, moved by Councillor Watkins, second by Councillor Sholem. Any changes, amendments to those minutes? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that is carried. Now we move to item 5. This is the amendment to the Category 3 buyout policy, and I'd just like to share some opening comments and some opening notes. And first of all, can I acknowledge the work that has been done so far? We have 110 meetings been held with our communities, who our hearts go out to at the moment as they change, their lives change. And we're in the process of meeting 110 families. So I'm pretty grateful since October when we started this work that we've been able to see so many, and the process is underway. We've got 25 offer letters in front of people now, so for people to consider those offers, and 5 properties have been settled. So since we started the voluntary buyout process, that is where we're at. So good progress has been made. But I'd just like to share some of the facts, because it is very complex when we look at amending policy, and for everyone to be quite clear, what is the intention and why would this paper be coming towards you for consideration today? So the total cost of demolition of residential dwellings for Category 3 properties has been estimated between $6 million and $8 million. At the moment, the only funder for the demolition is the ratepayer. As we know, the Crown declined to provide funding assistance for this part of the voluntary buyout. The voluntary buyout office has now been operating for 3 months and is making good progress, assisting our Category 3 property owners. The office are now dealing with real data rather than the assumptions when we first signed off on the policy. There are two things that they have found. One is that there are less people uninsured than anticipated, and more people than anticipated have comprehensive insurance policies covering full replacement. This is seeing a large proportion of property owners receiving insurance payments and Council Crown Office for land, which combines both, resulting in settlement packages which exceed market value of both the house and the land. This could be around 70% of Category 3 properties. This raises the question as to whether these property owners, having been well compensated, should make some form of contribution to the demolition of the dwellings, and that is for your consideration today. The insurance part of their settlements would likely to include allowance for demolition. Essentially, the questions for you are who should pay for the demolition costs in these specific situations, and what is fair and reasonable for both Category 3 property owners and the ratepayers who are funding this part of the program. The recommendations today for you to consider and decide upon would see the landowner remaining in a strong financial position to proceed with their personal recovery in their lives, and the council being able to administer the voluntary buyout office program on a fairer, equitable and more financially sustainable basis. There would be no scenario where an uninsured property owner, there would be no scenario where an insured property owner would receive less than the market value of the property. And on that note, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dan Gale to come forward. Dan, we'd love you to come up here and present some questions who he sent via his community representative, our Deputy Mayor Tania Kerr, but to present on behalf of some of our Category 3 owners. Welcome, Dan.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Mayor Sandra for granting me the speaking rights today. I am aware of what a privilege that is to be afforded. My name's Dan Gale, and along with my wife Ashley, we are the owners of the Estelle Holiday Park, a place I've called my home for 36 years. I'm here to represent Category 3 landowners who are unable to stand here and do so themselves. This is the only opportunity that has been afforded to us to do so. We are tired, frustrated and angry as HDC tell us one thing, do another, and shift the goalposts on people who have already lost so much. The voluntary buyout offer has deemed that engagement with our community wasn't necessary, as these changes were not significant enough. Our community has been blindsided, having been told throughout the whole process that these demolition costs would be covered by council. If you are someone who is facing somewhere in the vicinity of $20,000 to $50,000 being taken off them, they would, and they do, disagree. The potential change in policy appears to be a massive oversight to the tune of $2 million. This on its own should make it significant. Yet alone the fact that this $2 million impact will be concentrated on less than 137 property owners rather than spread out upon thousands of ratepayers. The councillors, if they accept the policy, will discriminate certain groups of people based on their insurance status. They will penalise those who are uninsured and the most vulnerable, along with those who were well insured but still did not receive enough for the replacement value of their assets, which they are then being prevented from replacing in situ. People who were affected have suffered unimaginable losses. The uninsured literally have nothing to their names. They lost their homes and all their belongings. Those who are well insured for their house didn't necessarily have good contents insurance. I know of many people who had between $20,000 and $50,000 of contents insurance, with the $20,000 mark being very common. There were also some who had none. So yes, taking an extra $20,000 to $50,000 of people is a huge deal. They had been relying on what we were told by council, and we feel now we're being king hit. How can councillors form a fair opinion if they only receive one side of the story, which what we believe is what would have happened if the public hadn't found out about this from our community members? In my opinion, sadly, I think it is a foregone conclusion that the recommended option will be adopted today. I only say this because Category 3 owners have been telling me that they have written correspondence from HDC stating the calculated demolition costs that would be imposed if adopted at this meeting. The lawyers are circling and litigation is pending. As Mayor Sandra stated in clause 1.4, that in some cases the insurance proceeds of a property owner has exceeded the market valuation of residential improvements. Clause 1.5 states that this raises a question as to whether these property owners, having been well compensated, should make some contribution to the demolition of the dwellings. Currently, where property owners are fully insured, the insurance proceeds are likely to include an allowance for demolition. Under the current policy, the property owner retains that allowance, yet the cost of the demolition falls on the council and ratepayers. This is considered to be inconsistent with the policy's objective of affordability to ratepayers and with the principle of acting in good faith between all parties, including those funding offers made under this policy. Most property owners I am aware of have an insurance policy which states replacement value up to a sum of a certain value. If they have received a full payout, including demolition costs, they were still underinsured. Otherwise, that property would have been deemed a repair. There is no such thing as being overinsured, as the insurance companies will only ever pay you out the amount required to replace what was lost, up to the maximum amount of the policy. An example would look like this. A homeowner is insured for a sum of $1 million. The house is a villa with lots of native timber and it has some cool architectural features. They suffer what is deemed a total loss, and the insurance pays them the full $1 million. They do this because the repair cost is actually $1.5 million. This $1 million payout includes demolition costs, but still isn't enough to replace what they had. Just because a homeowner has received a full payout, it does not mean that they have received enough to rebuild what they had. In fact, it just means they didn't have enough to repair it and therefore are actually underinsured on their assets. Now, if this homeowner had insured it for $2 million, they would have received $1.5 million and it would have been deemed a repair, and it would not have included demolition costs. If the market value of this property was deemed to be $900,000, that would mean that in the first example, the voluntary buyout office would deem this as well compensated, and they would charge a demolition cost as the insurance payment, which included the demolition cost, was higher than the market value. In the second example, they would still say that they were well compensated and still apply demolition costs, even though the payout would not include them, because the house would have been deemed a repair. The reality is that the property is actually overcapitalised, which is why they have received insurance payouts higher than the market value. The voluntary buyout office is comparing the house replacement cost, which is an insurance issue, versus the market value being what they could sell it for. Replacement value as deemed by insurance has no correlation to market value and should therefore be disregarded. And everyone should be treated the same. All being treated the same by council, continuing to pay everyone's demolition costs, and that would be acting in a just and fair manner. There is no double dipping. People were simply insured for a sum that they believed that would replace their homes like for like, in situ, which they are now prevented from doing so. The fact that some homeowners received a full payout that includes demolition costs simply means they didn't have enough cover to repair it or replace it. We do have a couple of solutions, however. Rather than taking more from those so badly affected, ask the national government to step up like they did in Christchurch when they were in power back then and cover this cost. Alternatively, talk to the Red Cross, who, from what info I can source, still have $3.5 million donated by people all over New Zealand to go towards those affected. This money has to be used for projects. And what a better project than this? Ultimately, our communities want the contribution to be left out of the policy and are furious at the suggestion that we are benefiting by receiving a full payout. There are no winners in this situation. People are hanging on by a thread. People are suffering with depression, marriage breakups, serious health issues and suicide due to the stress of the cyclone and this drawn-out process. This could very well tip some over the edge. Is a $2 million saving really worth that? I'd like to acknowledge all the cyclone-affected families who have been devastated by this event, and to state that our communities discussed that the timing of this flawed and unfair policy right before the 1-year anniversary with already heightened emotions. As one of our residents said, we have paid with everything we have, and some have even paid with their life. How much more contribution do you want? Come on, there is nothing left to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. And thank you very much, Dan. And also we acknowledge the hardship, the heartache, the loss that our devastated communities have been through and how difficult this whole time has been for everybody. As we try and manage writing policy and getting buyouts and getting work underway as quickly as we possibly can. Now I'd like to ask whether Gus or David, who are the authors of this paper, would like to add anything to their paper before I take questions first, councillors, before then we get into debate. Okay, so I'll take questions.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions. Councillor Kerr.
With your approval, Your Worship, I would like to ask some questions that have come from the community. These questions I have shared with our team online as well as the team here, and all councillors have a copy of them. So rather than reading them out word for word, I'll just try and read them lightly, and if I could get answers while Dan, Ashley and your supporters are here in the room. Is that okay? So first questions are, why did the Voluntary Buyout Office deem that this policy change is not significant and did not undertake any consultation, given that a potential impact of $50,000 to a Category 3 resident is seen as significant? And does a Voluntary Buyout Office believe that the lack of consultation really is in line with policy of acting in good faith and treating people with respect? So that's the first three questions.
Gus, is that you answering those questions? Or
I can.
David?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So thank you. And thank you, Dan, for your elegant words. Appreciate you being here today. Through you, Mayor. So in terms of significance and consultation, strictly speaking, the council's significance policy provides that it's not necessary to undertake consultation where the council is sufficiently well informed about the views and preferences of interested and affected parties. Consultation was undertaken as part of the LTP amendment to allow the buyouts to occur, and with category 3 landowners in formulating the policy. So the objectives of the policy reflect the outcome of that discussion, and that this change is intended to give better effect to those objectives which have been consulted on. And so this is a matter in which consultation is unlikely to provide further and better information to assist the council in making a decision on the content of the policy. So that's how we've brought this information to you as quickly as possible. Another point on that is we're seeing some of the data play out before us in the last week of Christmas. We quickly did the analysis around it and have brought it to council's attention as quickly as possible. So this has happened within a short time frame. The key reason for that is that we don't want to hold people up in the process if different decisions are going to be made. So that's why we've worked at pace.
I'd like to follow up question on that, Gus. Were some of the parties and whānau families that you've been working with through the Christmas period, were they advised that there is likely to be a demolition cost for them to wear?
Yes, so for all the people that are potentially subject to this clause, as soon as the matter it became a matter for council's consideration, anyone in that pre-offer stage, we brought it to their attention, and we have very clearly flagged that it is not council position, it's not council policy at this particular point, but we wanted to give them a heads up that this was being considered, and if it was approved, then the offer would reflect that change. So we think we've acted in good faith for those in the process and who are at that particular point in the process by being really upfront with the analysis and the recommendations we're putting in front of council.
Thank you for that. I do feel sad, actually, sitting here though, that the councillors haven't had an opportunity to consider the amendment before we were talking to our impacted whānau about this, before we had an opportunity to consider. And for that, to you, I apologise, actually, because we could have done better than that. So this was brought to our attention in the middle of the holidays. So, you know, this is a council decision, what is fair and reasonable and what is right. And first and foremost, we need to make sure that we understand everybody's views. So I'll pass back now to your further questioning. Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. A quick question. Out of the 165 properties, how many have a residence on them?
All of them.
There's 165, and that's spread across Napier as well, so it includes Napier.
Okay, thank you. And then going on to the next sort of tranche of 3 questions, with an estimated to 1890 residents impact, I understand that represents 70% of the category 3 properties. And does the voluntary buyout office believe it's okay to discriminate against these 70% based on their insurance status? And do they think it's appropriate to penalise the uninsured people rather than those who receive partial payments or were underinsured? I do know you have the full questions in front of you.
David, do you want me to kick that off?
I can kick off with the numbers. The current percentage is 66.63% of properties would fall under this policy. So that ties in with our estimate, and our estimate's at about 70%. So that represents about 76, 77 of the properties that would fall under that. Obviously, we don't have all the data. It's just the data we've collected soon, so that'll be refined as you go forward.
I mean, that the answer to the question from our perspective is that we're actually trying to treat property owners consistently based on their insurance situation. So for those that have got full insurance, and that includes a demolition contribution, the proposal is that a demolition contribution be sought. For people who are under or have got less insurance, or where they're clearly it's just a repairable in a repairable state, then we either already capture that demolition contribution and the insurance payment in the calculation that we make, or the payout hasn't included a demolition contribution. So we think we've been equitable in terms of the way that we're treating people based on their insurance status. For the uninsured, the proposal has been placed in front of councillors so that we are consistent with the approach that we've taken with EQC. So that's the basis of the recommendation. So in the policy, a component, a deduction comes off uninsured properties, which would be equivalent to the EQC payment if they had insurance. And so to be consistent in the policy, we're applying the demolition charges as well. As I think you said, Mayor, there are only estimated six number of those properties, and so happy to talk about that. But the main subject of concern here is the fully insured properties that are likely to include a demolition contribution.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, do you have any more?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for giving me the ability to do this. Does the voluntary buyout office think it's fair? I'll start again. Does the voluntary buyout office believe this is treating people with respect? Do they think it is fair to charge Category 3 owners the demolition costs when this expense in the Christchurch earthquake was covered by government? And then final two questions. Has the voluntary buyout office considered that their policy of charging people for demolition will drive homeowners to demolish their own property? And does the voluntary buyout office believe they are following their own policies? There was a much longer question in there, but if the answer could be given to that full question. Thank you.
So I'll just make some opening comments in relation to the first question before, Gus, you go to the detail. Yes, look, if we stand back and say, and I thought Dan made the point eloquently well, in Christchurch, the government at the time saw fit to pass an act of parliament and met the costs of everything at 100%. What was clear from the last government was that they were not going to do that, and we negotiated the best that we could, which was a 50-50% contribution between taxpayers and ratepayers, and that was the basis on which we did the negotiations for the Crown, and knew that our ratepayers would have to put in 50% of the costs of the voluntary buyout. And clearly the costs of demolition, which, between $6 and $8 million, the Crown was very clear that their contribution to that would be 0%. And I think the issue that Dan, and I thank you you've elegantly raised it, and the real judgment for the council is at this stage, and we've got no indications from the incoming government that they're going to change any of those settings, is really how do those costs fall between those that have been impacted by the cyclone and by the ratepayer if no one else is there to pay, which is really the nub of what's in front of council for deliberation and decision today.
Not to say that we have the Region's leaders have a meeting with the Minister of Finance this month, and it is a matter that we can raise with her. It is also an opportunity for us because we'll be also talking about any further future funding for silt debris collection, because work's not completed yet either, and there isn't any more funding. So those are the matters we'll be meeting with the Minister, and we can certainly put this on our agenda. Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Your Worship, can I please get an answer from the online team regarding locals maybe stepping back from this and trying to demolish their own house?
Ask David to respond to that part, and then there's another part which I can come back to too.
It is identified as a risk, obviously, that people will want to demolish their own house. Certainly in the VBO, when we engage with owners, and they've come in and some have asked if they can demolish their own house, and we're quite happy for them to do that if it's done under the correct guidelines, and if they can do it for cheaper than the demolition contribution, then the VBO welcomes that. and there will be no demolition charge applied to their house. However, we're going to try and treat it the same as we do with EQC. So at the moment, when property owners come in and provide us with evidence, receipts and so forth that they have removed silt from their property and carried out remediation, then we take that off the offer process and credit it back to them. And we'd look at doing the same with the demolition. So if property owners can engage a builder or a demolition company that can do it for cheaper, everybody's happy. Similarly, if the house can be relocated, that's always our first option. If people can take their homes and put them somewhere else, again, it's a win-win situation for everybody. I would point out that the figure that we've come up with is quite low for demolition costs, and we'd be very happy if they could do it for cheaper than that.
Thanks, David. And just to address I think there was a broader fairness question, and it does go back to the policy objectives that we're seeking to achieve. So obviously we are trying to secure the removal of risk to life with people living on Category 3 land, so enabling people to move on to safer areas. We're trying to give residents clear pathways, trying to secure long-term positive outcomes for the whole community and the environment, and affordability for ratepayers is a key objective as well. And so when we think about fairness, we're thinking about fairness across all of those objectives. And yes, we are very, very mindful about what is fair in terms of giving residents clear pathways. The question in front of council at the moment is it fair for the affordability of ratepayers question when the demolition costs have been included in some of these very large payouts. So we think we've been fair in making sure that we're covering all of the objectives in the policy.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor
Your Worship. I have finished. I do appreciate having the opportunity to ask those questions.
Great, thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I have three questions. The first one is, thanks to Dan, I thought that was an excellent presentation, very informative, very eloquent. The first question is, does the proposed policy take into account these people actually weren't planning to demolish their houses? This is something the council has imposed on them that was unintended by them. They were planning to live there forever. What account have we taken of that in this determination?
We tried to look at it from that very perspective. So if you're right, if council wasn't operating a voluntary buyout program, then the owner would be staying on the land and rebuilding their lives and rebuilding their home. So when we looked at the policy, we thought, well, if you haven't been paid out the full value of your house, so if your house is valued at $700,000, you've only been paid $300,000 by your insurance company, you would not be demolishing your house. You would be repairing your house with standard living. So that is why, one of the reasons why the demolition contribution is not applied to people who's receiving less than the value of their home. The other side of the coin, of course, is if you've received $1.3 million for your $700,000 house, then that indicates to us that your house is probably substantially destroyed or damaged, and the insurance council has recognised that, paid out a large to the limit of your policy, and therefore, if council wasn't involved, you would most probably still have to demolish your house and rebuild it in place, or at least effect very large major repairs, and that's a cost that you would have to face with council in there or not. So yes, we have to remove the dwellings to satisfy the voluntary buyout policy, removing risk to life. The other thing that you'll notice that the policy is only applied to dwellings or to the home. It's not applied to tennis courts, pools, septic tanks, any sheds, implement sheds, all the other things that council will still have to probably demolish, especially on sections under 2 hectares that we are purchasing. None of those costs are covered because, again, if you were the homeowner, you wouldn't be demolishing those. You would just be repairing your pool or your tennis court and getting it back up to standard. So we tried to consider that as one of the guidelines for the demolition contribution.
Thank you. The second question is, and you've sort of brushed over it briefly, many insurance policies are for replacement value. But these people are not rebuilding. Their replacement value is finding a new property to buy. What account has been taken of the fact that property values might have increased, that is, the replacement value has actually increased over what they are likely to get as the insured value and the council contribution?
it's impossible for us to predict the nature of the market by the time that people have settled. The only information we can go on is we have valued their property the day before the cyclone. They've received an X amount of insurance for that property, and that is how the offer is calculated. What the market does in the meantime, there is no mechanism in the policy for that. The other thing to remember is that the policy is not designed to provide a like for like from council's perspective. It's designed to remove the risk to life and enable people to move on. We're never going to be able to make people whole. We're never going to be able to replace everything they had. We simply don't have the funding or the capacity and the policy to do that, as much as we'd like to. It's just this is the mechanism that we have. All we can offer people is hopefully a way out from what they would have received if there wasn't a buyout policy, the fairest means that we can.
Thank
Last
you.
question.
I'd add to that can I add to that just a bit?
Thank you. Thanks, Gus.
A key aspect of the policy is that we're not just paying out on the dwelling cost of the market value of the dwelling. We are actually purchasing the land as well, and so those two things come together to provide a very significant payout to allow people to essentially resettle in as like-for-like situation as possible, notwithstanding the comments that David made. So, yeah, those two different components have been carefully considered to allow people to move on.
Last question, Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, my third question, I'm not sure if I'm able to ask this question, but I'm interested to know what level of support Dan's group has, to try and ascertain how much pushback we're really getting, because I don't feel that we've seen anything to really put a dimension on that. Can we ask Dan direct, or is that not?
I don't know. I'll ask the team who are working, because we've been working with all of the parties for some time now. So, so is that you, Bex, or is that our voluntary buyout office team, or it's our buyout team? Thank you, Gus. How much support is Dan and the community members getting?
Might pass to Dave, who's talking to the community connectors every day, and to answer that.
And I'd like to publicly acknowledge the work that my 4 community connectors do in very difficult circumstances, and they maintain open lines and communication under very trying circumstances sometimes, and I thank them for that. Every homeowner that comes in to the VBO is assigned a community connector. That community connector will maintain communications with them, answer all of their questions when they call and when they send emails, and provide them with support and information when they can. When we first put out the policy, or when it became aware and people in the community started ringing back the community connectors, obviously we're dealing with most of those incoming calls, and they did very well. The feedback we had, there is limited feedback through the email system. Most of the owners who had offers understood and were a bit grumbly but reasonably supportive. I would say that would be about 50%. I confirmed that we had a meeting today about the feedback that we'd received. So,
thank you, David. And can I just acknowledge, because I work daily also with the connectors, the amazing job that they are doing, and everybody. You know, if we get any concerns, somebody is going to be on the other end of the phone. So I just want to acknowledge them as well. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hope you can hear me. I just wondered, my question is, was there any consideration about just retrieving the demolition costs from those who have been paid out for it?
Currently, there's only been 2 offers officially accepted. There's one sitting, which is because it was presented before this came through, that will not be subject to it. The other 2 properties was mostly demolished. Most of the sheds were gone, and the other one has already been demolished. So there's no requirement to recover costs.
I mean, for the future. I'm talking about what we do in the future, whether we just retrieve the demolition costs from the ones who are paid by the insurance companies and the others don't have to pay. Just to clarify.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not quite following.
Sorry,
You probably need to...
can't hear?
No, we can hear.
So just to clarify, just wondered if you considered only retrieving demolition costs from those who are paid it via insurance.
Yes, and so it's a good question. I've got it now, I've grasped it. Thank you very much.
That is the policy.
Yeah, one of the things that, of course, we could have looked at with this is finding out from each individual property owner how much they had been paid for their demolition costs as part of their insurance payout. Rightfully, homeowners are quite protective of their insurance, and that is a contractual obligation that lies between the insurer and the person that they've insured. So it is one of the options that what we receive in the VBO is a letter on a letterhead saying what's been paid out for insurance. Sometimes demolition's put in there, sometimes it's not. So the other option that you could consider is to require any demolition cost to be outlined in that piece of paper that's provided to the voluntary buyout office, and allow the voluntary buyout office to query that with the insurer on behalf of the ratepayer.
Thank you for that. Are we in debate yet, son?
No, not yet. Okay, so thank you everybody for your questions. Do we have any further questions? Thank you, Councillor Apatu.
Thank you very much, and just to acknowledge our communities that are hurting, and Dan, thank you for your presentation. There wouldn't be one person not sitting around this table that knows of someone that's been terribly affected. This is a bit of a juggling act for us to consider the wider ratepayers and those affected by the cyclone. I have three quick questions. I just want to clarify, we're not asking for the full cost of the demolition costs, it's a contribution.
That is correct.
The second one, have we had an example of any homeowners that have acknowledged that they do have demolition costs in their insurance policy and have offered to cover those costs?
For this, we haven't specifically asked for this demolition costs as part of the insurance. If it appears on the letter, it appears on the letter. Some homeowners have expressed their desire to demolish their own property. Right. So again, it's something we consider with each individual property owner as they come in, their own individual circumstances and what we can do to help.
Okay, thank you. Last question, is there a risk of the demolition not going ahead if we adopt the policy?
The demolition not going ahead if we allow the homeowner to complete it, or if we do it?
If we adopt the policy at large, is there a risk that perhaps the demolition does not go ahead?
Demolition should always go ahead from our perspective because it'll be into the sale and purchase agreement and its requirement. And when we have the initial meeting, we discuss with the owner which buildings they'd like to keep if the building's over 2 hectares, what's residential and what's not, anything in particular. And so in some instances, for example, we won't demolish large sheds which are used for implementation, or that are beneficial for the ongoing use of the land, wells and so forth.
Thank you. Question from me for Mr. Allen. To understand, please, if we got a contribution from the voluntary buyout families and we achieved, as the report says, between $1.2 million and $2 million, where would the balance of that money come from? Where is the balance of the money going to come from? So if we don't get 1.1, 1.2 to $2 million, who pays and where does we get that funding from?
So if I could start, Your Worship, and then I'll hand to Mr. Allen. So at its most simple today, the estimated cost of demolition is $8 million. Under the current policy, the only place that's going to get paid from today is from the general ratepayer, the Crown, and we can advocate when the Minister of Finance comes to town. So where those costs fall, whether the council choose to ask for a contribution from the impacted property owners or not, it will fall on the general ratepayer and will have to be recovered through a form of rating the community into the future through either general rates or a targeted recovery rate. There is no other way of funding that cost.
Thank you.
Anything to add, Bruce?
Oh, sorry, Bruce. No. Councillor Kerr?
Just following your train of thought there, Your Worship. Mr. Allen, Mr. Bickle, a $2 million increase in the general rates equates to what is a rating increase, 2%. Rating percent? 2%.
If I could just clarify, Your Worship, so contributions that we make towards demolition are part of the $50 million cap that council has imposed on the whole VBO process, council will be borrowing that money, and so the cost to the ratepayer is the financing costs, the interest costs and the repayment costs over a 25-year period.
Thank you. Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking at the policy change proposal that sits before us, it's both an ethical and a legal question, or an issue. And the thing that I'd like to seek some reassurance around, and this might be for Asher, is our obligation to both those who are impacted but also the ratepayer. With the current policy, are we obliged to explore this because of the principles which are affordability for both those impacted and the ratepayers?
Who would like to answer that? Asher?
That's one for Asher.
A legal,
I'm happy to do
a legal question?
Through you, Your Worship. I don't think there's necessarily any obligation in a legal sense to revisit the policy, but it's certainly consistent with the policy settings that the council reached back in September 2023. And you did specifically include clause 9 in that policy, which provides for a review of the policy. My understanding is the intention was that ability to review would be exercised on an ongoing basis to ensure that the policy was still achieving the overarching and the other objectives and principles that the council had adopted. So I certainly think that continuing to check in on whether those objectives are being achieved is consistent with what the council has adopted through that policy.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler.
Through you, Your Worship. Last year, when the amended LTP went forward, we consulted with the community about the $50 million for the buyout. Was there also mention in there about costs, extra costs that the council would have to pay? That's the first question.
Through Your Worship, part of that process when we talked about all of the costs associated with the voluntary buyout was cost of acquiring properties, cost of compensating for the buildings that were lost, demolition, looking after the assets, and everything within that process was included in that cost.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Allen. And second question is, of the 200 approximate replies received from that amended LTP, what were the comments in relation to that? In terms of the council spending the money, if anyone could, it might be stretching a few memories, sorry.
Through Your Worship, you are stretching the memories back to last year, but fundamentally the community was in support of council undertaking the new activity being the voluntary buyout. There was some commentary around equity and fairness, those that were insured versus uninsured, and how that may play out. I think generally, when we consulted with the broader community, they were supportive of what council was undertaking.
Thank you. So just to paraphrase that again, the feedback received that people were generally happy with the buyout, including the demolition for the property. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Our questions now are complete, and now we move into debate. And I just remind you that what the intention of this policy is. It's about fairness and being reasonable and equitable to all parties. And there's certainly recommendations that the community have shared with us today that we can take forward and add as recommendations. And I'm delighted to read today that was released that the health and wellbeing funding of $2 million is going to come to Hawke's Bay to help with our wellbeing for our community impacted by the Cyclone Gabrielle. So that's fantastic news. I'll start with your comments, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. I have to say I do feel as I've been a bit ambushed on this issue. It was something I wasn't expecting to come back from the Christmas break and have to face. I do support all efforts by council to contain costs. You know, we know what the rates impact with or without the cyclone is likely to be and the effect it will have on our debt levels. But the thing that concerns me is it seems somewhat excessively rigid, and I really feel we haven't taken into account the true cost to many in the community who are suffering. I'm thinking of I think we've got a rates moratorium, if I remember rightly, but many of these people will be paying mortgages, many will be paying rent for alternative accommodation, and I just think somehow we're going to end up scooping up a lot of people who are already hurting and are going to be further damaged financially. Whilst some people may do very well out of it, and if we can have a policy that deals to that, I would be more than happy to support it. But I'm struggling to support the policy as it currently stands.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Councillor Fowler.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. So to my point before, or the questioning about the community knew that they would be paying demolition costs as part of this process. I believe that the document should have been discovered that insurance policies did in fact have demolition clauses in them, and that the original agreement should have made provision for that. It didn't. Therefore, people were led to believe that they would be paid out their demolition costs, and I believe we are not acting in good faith by going against that fact. Even though, yes, and also think it is regrettable that I, as a councillor, had to learn from Pakowhai residents that connectors had already been talking to them about this proposal before it even come across me. I think that is very regrettable occurrence.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Councillor Buyout.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Dan, for both your passionate speech, and thank you to all those who've come here today. And also thank you to the staff for your shepherding of this process, your answers today, and bringing this to our attention. To me, the crux of this issue is who pays. And to quote the paper, this proposal is to prevent the owner being paid for demolition, but the council ratepayer undertaking the demolition at no cost to the owner. Many of the residents in my ward are still struggling from the impacts of the cyclone. They have slips, they have lost bridges, they have massive detours to get back to town and live their lives, and it is taking a toll on their communities, their mental health, their well-being, and the well-being of their businesses. I am not sure I can go to them and ask them to cover the costs that is already covered by insurance. I look forward to hearing more views from around the table and potentially changing my view, but at the moment I cannot see how I can look them in the eye and justify that.
Thank you, Councillor Buyout. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you. I'll try to talk a bit louder. So, thank you, Dan. You said everything that I wanted to say, actually, and I thought you'd been reading my notes. For me, my experience was that I did get flooded. My property got flooded. I lost 26 trees that I planted 40 years ago. I have great empathy and compassion for the people of the Category 3 homes because they've lost everything. They've lost homes, furniture, memorabilia, pets, stock, vehicles, gardens, community. And for us to bring this policy right on the anniversary of the cyclone is reprehensible to me. So I can't support the recommendations and think that the ratepayer wouldn't feel terribly overburdened by helping out.
So I can just remind you, Councillor Redstone, that the ratepayer is helping out to the tune of $50 million.
I know.
Intergenerational debt for our ratepayers for the future.
Know.
Thank you. Just wanting to say that, you know, there is help out already happening that we've been working through. Our debt now this month will be $400 million. Thank you. Others. Councillor Strollum.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I also would like to thank the community for coming here today, and thank you, Dan, for speaking on behalf of those you represent. I'd also like to thank the wide number, especially over the last few days, of affected community members who have rung and emailed me and told me of individual stories. One that particularly hit home was a story about a number of family members who have all lost their homes and have found that market value won't allow them to replace unless they combine all their market values to buy a single property. The pain is very real, and David's words echo, we can't make people whole again. What we are trying to do with this policy, though, is give them a pathway. So as much as I think of those that are here today and those who have been in touch with me, I also need to think of the solo mum who lives in Mahora, who's trying to make ends meet and meet her obligations. I need to think of the fixed income retiree that sits in Havelock North, who also doesn't have options. And I also think of the student, the AT student in Flaxmere, and I have to consider their needs as well. And unfortunately, if insurance is covering the cost of demolition, I cannot in good faith pass those costs onto those people. So at this stage, I do support the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Sholin. Do you wish to move the recommendations? Or would you want to hear some more debate?
More views, Your Worship.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Other speakers, please. I'll go around the room, starting from Councillor Watkins. Pardon? Oh, sorry, Elwyn.
Elwyn? Okay. Thank you, Dan. I've seen with my eyes and I've visited your sites. I would say I have some idea of what you've been through, but I will never comprehend fully what you've been through. We talk about $50 million that our ratepayers have to pay back, and I'm going to ask Bruce, over the life of the loan, what will the ratepayers pay back?
Through Your Worship, so on a $50 million loan, repaid over 25 years with an average 4.5% rate financing cost. It's about $3.3 million a year over that time.
So that's in excess of $100 million that ratepayers will actually pay back. I agree with my colleague, Councillor Buddo and Councillor Sholin out there. There are so many people who are struggling, maybe not to the extent of you people, but actually struggling where every dollar, every $1 is precious. I think of the people of the ratepayers of Christchurch who made no contribution to what happened there. And our people have fronted up with a huge contribution. And for those who have insurance policies that include a demolition cost, I think it's fair that we look at a contribution back. So I do support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'm going now to online. Councillor Dixon, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. Gus and David, firstly, many thanks for an extremely well-written paper. I went through it word by word because I had the time to do it. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the flood victims that have suffered enough out there. Their lifestyle, their belongings, their treasures, and their retirement plans and so on, they've all gone. They've lost those. But at the end of the day, in front of us, we've got an anomaly that we could never have perceived at the very beginning of this. And this is why we're having to face this issue today. At the end of the day, each case will be handled individually. And that is why I support these recommendations, because our ratepayers can't afford any more burden. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Now move to Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. To me, the crux of this is whether the insurance has included demolition costs or not. I don't think we should be considering replacement value insurance, etc., etc. But I am opposed to double dipping. And I think the amendment is quite blunt and broad. It actually doesn't target double dipping of demolition costs. So on that basis, I don't think I can support the recommendation.
Are there any recommendations you'd like to see made or any changes to the recommendation, Councillor Corbyn?
If there's a change to the recommendation, I think it would be specifically for property owners whose insurance payout included demolition cost.
Thank you. Can I just get a note taken of that, Caitlin? We'll come back to that. Thank you very much. Councillor.
Kia ora tātou. Firstly, I'd like to mahi to Dan and everybody that's come to. How do you explain what you've gone through unless you've actually lived through it and you still haven't lived through it? So my heart goes out to you at this time because our people are suffering. We know how hard it is on the ground. We've seen the suffering and we still are going to experience it, but psychologically it's going to go on forever and ever. I can't support that because I was thinking of all the other ratepayers and I don't really want that burden passed on just like everyone else around this table sort of in that quandary at the moment.
Councillor Jessup.
I remember the LTP planning session in Taradale, our ratepayers are asking us to be prudent. So, and I think we need to acknowledge that this is new territory for us. We are not going to get this right all the time, and I think we have to acknowledge we have not got the process right about this. Having said that, I do support the amendment to the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Apatu. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Wow, it's one of the toughest decisions. I don't think we had as many people even here when we were deciding on the 50-50 buyout, and to hear it from the heart in what you've come to today, my head has been circling from being in support of the policy to be against the policy and around, and it's just listening to colleagues around the table, but more importantly, as others have said, all of us as ratepayers at large in the significant situation that we are going to be facing in 2024. There are a lot of costs upon council. We've tried to do the best that we possibly can, and I think as we've touched on, and it goes back to those values that we said right at the beginning, was to try and make it as fair as possible for everybody. And I think part of that fairness is also being able to listen to and having the opportunity to listen to your accounts of what has occurred right at ground zero. But at the moment, and we all have to think big picture, we understand the stuff that you've gone through, and the big picture for you is a worse situation than others, but at the moment I'm supporting the way the policy has been framed up.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Fowler, you've spoken. Councillor Butto, you've spoken. Councillor Hickey.
Kia ora no tātai. Ka tangi tonu te ngākau. As a whānau member of Omahu, as I stand here today, we too are building our own home, trying to recover from the cyclone. Now, unfortunately, we're in this position as councillors where we have to make decisions for the betterment of our whole community. My family went to school in Hokorere. Rere mōna haki wai, for which the house in Omahu we are trying to rebuild. Your pain is also our pain. We're talking about $2 million. We're talking about $50 million. I find it very hard to consider that a price compared to the impact of people. The wounds and scars are going to be long, long, long after a transaction of $2 million. The pain and the mamai will live on for hundreds of years. Yeah. I stand here as a witness to the struggles that our people are having on the ground. I can't take from one community and give to another community and think that's okay. Unfortunately, I don't agree with this policy change. I don't accept the change today. Maybe in due course, we should consider the recommendations of Councillor Corbyn, though, that if this vote goes ahead today, that those who did receive those demolition costings and their insurance, if willing, may contribute. But I can't have a broad, straight across, and be supportive of that, knowing that I may be taken from one community and given to the other community. If there are 92,000 citizens in Hastings District Council, then we, the 92,000, should support the kaupapa katoa. Nā reira, as I said, we are all feeling the mamai. The tears may not be seen in open public forums, but that doesn't mean that we don't cry with you. Dan, for you to stand up there as a representative of your community is a hard thing to do. Likewise for my community of Flaxmere, where we're trying to understand how to get a supermarket, and you're trying to understand how to relive your life. Nā reira. Ka hoa te aroha ki o kōtau, te whāna kua taumau nei tēnei ai. Aha ko ka tū a tīnana, kei ko nei a wairu o tātou. You may stand up there by yourself, sir, but all those before you who aren't here physically are with you. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Henry. Councillor Kerr.
May I ask if Councillor Lawson's able to speak?
My apologies, Eileen.
I just want to clarify one question, and I'm sure I have this right. So through you, Your Worship, that no insured landowner will get less than market value for their property if this amendment proceeds. Is that correct?
That is correct.
This is really hard as I will face my community because standing here, as others have expressed, we're here as representatives of our community, but we also represent the complete district, all of the other ratepayers. I look at the total cost of demolition costing our district $6 to $8 million. I look at this policy as may recover $1.2 to $2 million from fully insured landowners who are getting at least the market value. Then I glance at what's happening in Auckland, and Auckland are only paying out up to 90% of the market value of the property.
95.
95?
Yes.
Okay, 95%. property
And
value.
also discounted if you're uninsured.
Yeah. So when I try and find my balance of what's fair and what's equal, I really am sitting right here on the fence as I listen to my learned colleagues speak. But at the beginning of this triennium, I had to stand at that podium and speak and sign a declaration to do the best for the whole district. And because I have signed that declaration, I cannot do anything other than support the category the changes to the recommendation. I say that with a heavy heart to those that I face, but I do support these recommendations. We're only asking for a contribution from those that are paid above and beyond the market value, for those that are fully insured plus. So I support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's with immense compassion and empathy for both those who are cyclone impacted and those in our community who are really struggling in a cost of living crisis that I would like to move the recommendations as they stand within the report. We must be aware of the compounding costs of recovery on our community that go beyond just the voluntary buyout and those that are coming. This is going to be a very big, potentially decade for our community, and I cannot in good conscience impose costs upon our community at whole when there are other sources with which to pay for the demolition. I'd also like to acknowledge that the policy is only asking for a contribution. It looks to me, and I do ask if Mr. Elliott can please confirm, that reading the report, I cannot see a situation where an affected property owner, a Category 3 property owner, will have to pay the full demolition costs. Is that correct?
It's not something we can guarantee, but where we've pitched it at $125 is well below what a demolition cost would cost.
And I understand we're not including things like tennis courts, swimming pools, extra unattached to the home buildings.
And probably the biggest thing we're not including is any discovery of asbestos, which will push the price up by a minimum of $6,000 to $8,000 per property. 84% of our properties were built prior to 2000.
As much as I loathe that we've had to make an amendment to this policy, and I loathe the timing, and I do join the Mayor in apologising for that timing, I do see this policy amendment as being fair to the whole community. So that is why I will support and move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you. And Councillor Corbyn, are you interested in an amendment to the recommendations?
Yes, I am. But we haven't got the recommendations there to easily view what the amendment would be. But I think it should be amended to...
Well, if you just talk about the amendment and then we can consider what that could look like. But I'd just like to speak also on the recommendations before us as you work through what your amendment could include. So if you work that up now, you have... Scott's going to help. Okay. Okay, so I just want to acknowledge everybody. This has been a hugely hard decision. This has been incredibly hard for the voluntary buyout panel, the voluntary buyout officers who work day in, day out, deciding how are we going to work. And in the scheme of things, when we hear today that it costs us $3.5 million a year, we were really proud of our policy. Very proud of having our policy that it was 100%. It didn't have 95% like others, and it also didn't make any distinction of whether you're insured or uninsured. That was really important for us in October when we started this process. And this whole policy, this whole voluntary buyout process is about fairness to everybody. And I think that the opportunity is to have some contribution towards the demolition is the best way in front of us, which is fairness and equity to all of our ratepayers. We've got a very, very large journey ahead of us. We've got nearly $800 million to fix our roads and bridges. Our debt levels are at $400,000, 400 million. We wish it was, yes. Where our silt and debris is far from being fixed. We still got 1.2 million cubic square metres to collect of silt and debris. So we have a lot to do. We have a lot to pay for. And I think the small contribution towards a voluntary buyout for our demolition of our properties is a fair and equitable way to take us forward. Now I will ask Elwyn to add his amendment and we'll put the recommendations. And I'm not going to give up with our region's leaders when the Minister of Finance arrives here on the 16th of February to see if we can seek some more funding to help our most impacted communities recover and get on with their lives successfully. So that is a given. That is something that is going to happen. We're not finished yet. The government always said the recovery is going to take a long time. We've got 5 or 10 years yet to recover. So we're just going to have a look at adding what Councillor Corbyn has suggested. And I will just take 5 minutes actually. It would take 5 minutes, everybody, just for the officers to get themselves prepared and ready and thinking about what Elwyn's intentions is for this recommendation. So I adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
I've sent the amendment to them from Asher, but I can't get hold of them. Hey? Oh, okay, whoops again.
Gus, your mic's on.
Sorry.
to offer clear path.
Could everyone please be seated? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for your input into this really, really important policy. And thank you to our community who have shared a lot of information with us today. That has been incredibly helpful. None of us today are in a position. We need some more information. We've had some facts shared to us. We've had some queries and questions, and we need to fully understand, and I'm going to leave this item on the table. So I'm happy to move from the chair. I have a seconder, please, Councillor Nixon, that we leave this item on the table. We need to have some more information, that questions that have been raised that the officers haven't been able to answer. We need to do some more work on this. We're not going to adopt a policy on the hop and on the fly. So I have the motion. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That motion is carried. I now break for a cup of tea. People, please take their seats, bring their cup of tea, and the meeting will resume.
Sandra?
Yes.
Page 6, I will be out of the room.
Oh, thanks, Tan. Yes.
I was inspired, Lacey. Oh, really?
All right, is everybody back, please? Tania's declared a conflict on this item. Right, resuming now. Thank you, councillors. Welcome back to Malcolm, Craig. Now we move on to item 6, which is the proposed plan change for category 6, lifestyle subdivision, which is in line with our voluntary buyout and making sure our people have a comfortable place to go and options for them to stay in their valleys, stay in their communities, but live in somewhere safer. So this is what this Plan Change 6 hopefully will enable, and putting that in place for people to fully understand it. Thank you, Rowan. Is there anything you'd like to add to the paper?
Your Worship. Yes, I just have a couple of amendments to the plan change that has been appended to your agenda item, and these are in relation to a minimum site size. So previously we had in the performance standards a minimum site size of 2,500 square metres, which aligns with what can be achieved under the farm park provisions. But in discussions with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, they've said that with the size of houses that are built now and particularly on hill properties, which a number of these are likely to be, that the effluent fields now need to be much larger. And we're looking at effluent fields of around 700 square metres now being required. So we're now proposing to put the minimum site size up to 4,000 square metres, which is, still, you can get a lot of, it's still quite a good size property in terms of probably what people have had in terms of it's probably equivalent to what they are trying to replace. So 4,000 square metres is what we're proposing, and we're also looking at deleting one of the assessment criteria around the sunset clause because it doesn't quite align with what our activity status is. So those are the two amendments that are before you. But as you say, otherwise this is providing a smoother pathway for people who have entered into a voluntary buyout agreement, smoother pathway through the subdivision process. They don't need to make the landowner who they are purchasing off doesn't have to meet the same kind of requirements for time frames for creating lifestyle sites, and some of the other performance standards may not need to be met. So, this is hopefully something that will be of good support to those people in the Category 3 classification.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally support this and I'm very happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon? The second. Thank you. Councillor Butto? Oh, no. Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, Worship. Also very happy to support the recommendations on the basis of allowing those who have been so heavily impacted to remain in the communities that they would like to continue living in.
Thank you. Any further questions or any comments? Have a mover and a second. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you very much for the paper, and we look forward to sharing it with our community, and we hope that it can get underway as fast as possible. Thank you, Rowan. Item number 7, Moving on to the Hearings Committee composition for the application of orderings. Welcome, Caleb. Caleb, would you like to take us through these recommendations? I'll start with Councillor Butto.
I'm happy with the recommendations as they stand, and I'd be happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Sholem.
I'm happy to second, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Caleb, is there anything that you would like to share with that's not included in the paper?
No, Your Worship. It's compared to what's been discussed today, a relatively minor procedural matter where there's been a perceived bias or conflict raised by the applicant's project manager. To manage that, we have decided to appoint a new chairperson to hear that resource consent application.
Thank you. I have the mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you, Caleb. Item number 8. This is our Hastings Haste-Based Housing approach, and it's wonderful to be able to check in since 2019 and to be able to hear and understand where we've got to and the success and achievements and where we're likely to go with our Hastings Place-Based Housing Plan. And I invite our Chief Executive, Nigel, to take us through his paper.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. As you know, this has been a huge focus for this council on our behalf of our community since 2019. So this is the 4-year check-in, but I'm going to take the report as read, but whip through some key bits because I think it's important to check in. So 2019. The situation in Hastings, we'd seen the public housing register grow from 50 to over 600 in the 4 years leading up to 2019. We had 450 individuals of our community living in motels as emergency housing. The government was spending $10 million a year on motels in Hastings. 73% of people in the emergency accommodation were Māori, and we had the dynamics of 5,000 RSC workers impacting also on housing, having to be housed for 7 months of the year. 2/3 of our visitor accommodation were being used for either emergency housing or worker accommodation. We'd seen our housing wait list had gone from lowering the eligibility in 2014 to 55 years to fill them up, to in 2019 being fully occupied with hundreds on the waiting lists. We'd seen 700 homes converted to Airbnbs, probably not surprising given how much of our visitor accommodation was being used for things other than visitors. And, we have to acknowledge that we were part of the problem leading up to 2019 because we hadn't zoned enough land relative to demand for housing. So that was the situation in 2019. So 2019, if you can just press it, Lynn, that those of you that were here will recall, is we had the announcement from the government of the Hastings Place-Based Housing pilot, which was a partnership between central government, Hastings District Council, Ngāti Kahungunu, and our mana whenua iwi organisations, the Tai Whenua were here to Taung, and I acknowledge Mike, you as the chair, and Tamatea Pōkai Whenua. And it was all organised around a vision of making sure that we had homes for our people, and we started to get the housing market working right across the entire housing continuum. So the objectives that we set in 2019 was clearly the need to build more public houses. In the 3 years leading up to 2018, Housing New Zealand at the time, they'd only built a net 6 homes in Hastings. We needed to get people out of emergency housing. We needed to support Māori-led housing solutions, find solutions to RSC, which is a critical part of supporting our horticulture and viticulture sector, needed to zone more land, needed to start to tackle some of the land use and land planning issues. And at the heart of the strategy was the idea that, yes, we needed houses, but as the Mayor always says, houses become homes and home-shaped communities, and we should be building deliberately neighbourhoods and communities that were organised around mixed tenure communities and not either exclusive high-end gated communities or concentrating social housing all in designated areas. So those were the objectives. So I think really important to reflect that in 4 years on, principles led by place. So the council stepped into that role, a genuine partnership with iwi, Manawhina and central government, and that we had to have, given that, if you can recall, in 2019, I think Meka Whaitiri as an MP, Nahi as the chair of the Kahanunu at the time, was saying to the government, forget Kiwi build, we need iwi build. It's predominantly Māori that's ending up in emergency housing. We need to find iwi-led, Māori-led housing solutions. So, what's been delivered in 4 years? So we've seen 622 public transitional iwi, papakainga and affordable first homes either built or are under construction today. 1,500 RSE beds have been built in that time, and one of the critical things this council did was change the district plan to enable RSE accommodation to be built on orchard and in industrial areas. Today there are 509 homes in varying stages of resource consent. The most significant is Tamatea Pōkai Whenua's fast-track consent application for 475 homes at 238 Stock Road, or Wairatahi as it's known. We've had over $30 million worth of infrastructure from funding from government that's enabled us to upgrade our wastewater or bring land into subdivisions, most notably in Flaxmere. We've between ourselves and the Tai Whenua secured $22 million of funding to build 66 affordable rental homes in Flaxmere this year. And Ngāti Kahungunu is one of 4 iwi prototypes in the country with $47 million allocated to build affordable homes. So, some of the things that are worth highlighting. Wainako, and again I acknowledge the Tai Whenua, Mike, and your chairmanship. It was only in 2019 that the then Chief Executive George turned the sod on Wainako, and that was a partnership between the council and Tai Whenua. And you look today, 37 homes under construction and 27 have been completed. And I think, Mike, talking to your board, can barely keep up with demand now in terms of the quality of homes that you're building out there. Tarbert Street, very wet day, your worship, when you were in full regalia under an umbrella turning the sod in July 2020. And today that whole subdivision is completed across 18 transitional homes and 17 affordable first homes. 244 Flaxmere Ave, build ready now. Town centre, not far away, Carnarvon Drive. And as I mentioned earlier, 238 Stock Road, which is probably the next big decision that's due this month from the EPA. So if we go to outcomes, Lynn, importantly from an iwi Māori-led housing solutions, obviously Wainako and what the Tai Whenua are doing is, I think, the largest chip now, Mike, in Hawke's Bay. We've also seen papakainga has been a huge part of the outcomes, the Māori housing outcomes. So 85 homes completed or under construction since 2019, but really important, a whole lot of work that's gone into enabling infrastructure that's created 19 different papakainga sites for forward demand. We've also undertaken, and we'd like to do more of this, a partnership that was funded between Te Puni Kōkiri and the District Health Board. It was at the time to target substandard homes that with at-risk health children. So $1 million program that upgraded 40 homes that basically covered 117 at-risk children with respiratory illness. This, if it plays, and always a bit conscious that when we have people on Zoom, we'll see, Lynn, or we might just... Let's just keep going. We'll see it, watch it on a different link. So from an outcomes point of view, that the short-term objective was try to eliminate emergency motel accommodation, and we're just about there. 450 individuals in motels in 2019. The last formal report at the last quarter of 2023, the MSD do, down to 66 individuals across 39 households. We now have record levels of forward land supply, and importantly 400 zones serviced and build ready, lots available for public and affordable homes, as well as a record level of land supply for market housing. And obviously, you've got all looking forward to the Plan Change 5 hearings in 2024 around the proposals to enable greater intensification of housing in identified city living zones. So, some reflections to finish, and then some way forward. This has been a sustained effort and commitment across all of the partners, Kāinga Ora, MHUD, TPK, the Tai Whenua, iwi, tamatea, pōkai whenua and council. So it's actually, I think worth reflecting, over 600 homes have been delivered and a lot of enabling infrastructure put in. But we need to acknowledge that we've built a lot of houses, but probably not too many neighbourhoods and communities. And the exceptions to that really are probably Papakāinga, Wainako and Tarbert Street. We've seen, that this council's taken really strong ownership across the council table in terms of making homes for our people one of the council's priorities. And I think we've held the focus on the whānau and community outcomes that we're wanting to see from housing. I want to acknowledge MHUD, who've really tried to make sure that everything on the government side has been integrated across many different ministers and agencies. We've been lucky to have Brian Donnelly as a critical friend the whole way through this process, and we can't gloss over that none of this stuff happens without a sustained level of funding from everyone involved, including the council. That the problems that we had were a long time in their making, and the only way that you tackle this is through staying the course over the long run and being prepared to make investments. But looking to the future, as a final slide, we needed to get people out of motels, and we built a lot of houses. What we need to ensure for the next period of time is that we're actually deliberately building neighbourhoods and communities that are consistent with what we said in the long-term housing strategy. Mixed tenure. They should be a mix of market, affordable first homes, rent to buys, social, public. We should be deliberately building those neighbourhoods and communities. And we have got that opportunity, because right now in Hastings, across our three land holdings, the land holdings of the Tai Whenua and the Crown, who have got plenty of residentially zoned land, there's that opportunity, but we're going to need to drive that really strongly. I think that the next evolution of the place-based housing approach is to say, well, the next logical step, we don't need a new strategy, we don't need different governance. Why can't you just move the funding under a performance and outcome funding contract to us, Hastings, and give us the funding and the decision rights and all the accountability, because we think we could drive that better. And we think we've got a genuine question that needs to be asked around what is the best model and who is the best provider for doing the management of people that need wraparound services, and how do we deliberately build neighbourhoods and communities. And again, I'll just say that one of the things that's pretty obvious is, our Tai Whenua do an outstanding job in that regard as a large social services and health provider who have become the largest chip in Hawke's Bay. And, noticeably, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, through their 100 or so transitional homes that they've delivered into Hastings, have procured the Tai Whenua to play that role. As a council, we made a choice to transfer our senior housing portfolio management to the Tai Whenua. But whatever the answer is, we're looking to make sure that we are actually building strong neighbourhoods and communities, and that's got to be a focus going forward. So, in summary, I think it's been a heck of a 4 years. It's been a really big focus for this council. There's lots to be proud of. I think we've made some really good progress, but we're going to need to stay the course. And I think that there's some really big opportunities and some things that we need to be focused on if we're going to be true to the strategy and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve for whānau and community. So with that, Your Worship, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thank you, Nigel, for your dedication and commitment over the last 4 years to make sure that we stay on course and work with our partners to deliver the best outcomes for our community. And I think that, you know, as you said, the opportunities in the future, we've seen ourselves through Tarbert Street and Wainako, to see the empowerment of people owning their own home, to me has been the most powerful thing that I've ever come across, where people can actually feel proud that they have an opportunity and a pathway into home ownership through the models that we have worked with. So that's what's really exciting. We know we've got a desperate need for long-term rentals and rental accommodation. As we heard, MSD said that they could fill up 100 rental homes tomorrow and still need more. So we're desperate for rentals, so we've got to keep going. But just providing, you know, it's about this, housing is about empowering people. Yes, to have a safe place to call your own and home is great, but actually to have the empowerment of people and their wellbeing being fulfilled through home ownership, long-term rentals, housing security, rather than just government houses is our future. Thank you. Councillor Jessup.
Firstly, I'd just like to thank and acknowledge everybody that has put this model up, especially from Flaxmere. My whāngai daughter is Amo Taisi, and I know how hard it was for her as a solo mother in debt to climb up that maunga to get her own house by herself with a lot of support. But yes, Mike and all the other players that helped her to get there, and especially the Hastings District Council. I am really impressed with Warren Heke and him with his winning that award for the homeless. So I was just wondering when we could have a workshop to see, it's coming up to a year now, how he's managing, because there's a whole lot of more homeless to think about on that street, because I've been there to help them serve out at 5 o'clock and I've seen it. Yeah, I'd be really interested in supporting Warren, and I know there's Struggle Street coming.
Yep, through
Thank
your
you.
worship, and thank you, Councillor Jessup. Yes, whilst I included in the report, and I didn't put it up there, whilst the original place-based housing strategy didn't deal with homelessness, we put a huge amount of work in again with partners, the homeless study in 2021, the bringing the churches together with council, forming a trust, supporting Warren. You know, what we are seeing, and it's pretty challenging at the moment for Warren, you know, we set that model up to be sustainably funded, and the population of homeless at the time was 40. Today, there's 180 homeless registered with Warren, and constantly working both with, you know, the homeless hub to how we manage that. Again, in the report that, you know, when we started in 2019, there was no accommodation for homeless in Hastings. You know, we have a funded accommodation, but only for up to 10 a night. We know we have some gaps around, particularly Wahine, that have no accommodation options if you're homeless. So this is going to be an ongoing focus, and a real tension as we're working with both Warren and the neighbourhood in Market Street. Whereas as a council at a community level, we both want a vibrant and safe CBD, you know, with businesses and attracting tenants, with also the things that we know about the homeless, that we need to provide the right services for them, and it has to be in the CBD, is what all the research says. So, you know, the homeless work has been a really big part of our journey as well, and you know, it's probably just reflecting what's going on in the community, some of the things that we're seeing now, but probably a right time to have you know, Warren and the team come back in and connect with how the trust is going. And whilst you know, I think I've mentioned it in the report, you know, we don't do these things for awards, but as you know, there's been a steady stream of people nearly every month of the year coming to Hastings. What can we learn? How have you managed to do this? And you know, the councils and our partners have received, you know, 4 national excellence awards in the last 3 years for the work that we've done in the housing space. So, yeah.
Can I just add that there's 50, they were feeding 50, but now they're feeding 200 a day, because a lot of them are coming from Napier.
To be clear, and this is from Warren, we had a meeting just before Christmas, so the churches and the trust are offering a 3 times a week meal service to the homeless in Napier, so they're taking meals to Napier, and we know that this is not a particular Hastings issue. I mean, we've all seen the front page of the Hawke's Bay today and the people sleeping in driftwood huts on Marine Parade. This is a issue everywhere, and I think you commented, Your Worship, having been to San Francisco, and you know, if you visit Wellington recently, if you go down the Golden Mile or Courtenay Place, you know, this is a real issue for all communities around homelessness.
Thank you, Councillor Jessup. I totally agree with you. While 10 beds isn't going to be enough, so how we manage having more places for our homeless to sleep has got to be one of our actions, and I think putting that down as an action to have the Trust and Warren come in and speak to us, Lynn, because at the moment we've only got 10 beds, and as we said, nothing for women. So there's got to be a real big priority for us, is trying to manage the increasing numbers, and we know that COVID has exacerbated the situation and the cyclone. Councillor Buyout?
Thank you, Your Worship. A huge congratulations to you, Nigel, and your team, and the Tai Whenua and your partners on this. It must be the most successful housing pilot in the country at this point, and a huge indication of what local government can do when it's joined up in funding and planning and with partners at the local level, making local decisions that are right for local people. And I think if there's any lesson to take from this, is that if a government wants to provision housing outcomes and show success, then coming to Hastings and seeing what we can deliver and have proven to be able to deliver as a track record is huge. And a congratulations to also previous councillors for putting this together, for backing Nigel and the team and the partners. It's really exciting for me to be a part of a council that is making meaningful progress on issues that matter to my peers and that are hugely important, not just here, but around the country. So thank you very much and congratulations, and very happy to move, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Have a second to thanks. Councillor Sholem?
Your Worship, I would love to second, but I would also like to propose a small amendment if Councillor Buyout will allow it through, which is to B, and it's really just to highlight what Councillor Buyout has already said. I would propose that B become that Council notes the progress and results of the place-based housing strategy and thanks the Executive Governance Group, independent advisors and partners for their mahi.
You want that included in a recommendation or an action?
I'd like to include that in the recommendation as a formal record of our thanks to those who have been involved in this, the results.
Cool, thank you. Okay. Councillor Hickey?
Your Worship, I'd just also like to acknowledge our CE, Nigel Bickle. The day that the Prime Minister came to Waipoti Marae, and we stood up there and there was lots of cheers about what we were going to do and to see some action take place. But I note that we seem to be affording Flaxmere all the great transitional houses, and I'd like to consider that we share some of those transitional houses around our community of Heretaunga and social housing as well. But congratulations, sir, and congratulations, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. And I mean, one of the things that was really important in the report was to actually be very specific where all the houses have gone. And whilst there's a little bit of transitional in Flaxmere, a lot of the affordable housing and no kainga order housing has gone into Flaxmere.
One.
One. And not surprisingly, and let's be honest, these are some of the things that we've dealt with over the 4 years as Mayfair communities have called for meetings in schools and stuff, goes to that question about the neighbourhoods that we're building. And not surprisingly, when you look at the numbers, all of the big numbers of public housing has gone into the public housing areas of Hastings. Raurika, Mahora, Mayfair, St Leonard's. That is where nearly all of it has been sort of concentrated.
Councillor Dixon, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. These are all very impressive outcomes, Nigel, so well done to you and your team. Just a question for you, Nigel. Are we going to invite Sir Bill English here to view personally what we've achieved and at the same time highlight our concerns with Kāinga Ora?
So, as the report alluded to, Sir Bill English has been appointed to review Kāinga Ora. I, at his request, met with Sir Bill English and his team last week, and I understand that the review team will be coming to Hastings in February to have a deeper look and engagement with the council and others about the place-based work that we've been doing.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. No further comments. We have a mover and a seconder. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. And you've just added Wendy's acknowledgement. Oh, lovely, thank you. Right, item number 9. Moving on to amendment of meeting schedules. Thank you, Louise. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Nixon, seconded by...
Sorry, could I just add?
Yes.
Perhaps make one suggestion in terms of item 5 that was left to lie on the table
yes.
earlier this afternoon. Could I suggest, to keep things going, have a additional council meeting for Tuesday the 12th of February, 1 p.m. for that particular... Just a recommendation.
Tuesday the 12th. No, Tuesday is a Monday.
Oh, sorry. Is it Tuesday the 14th?
So,
oh, the 13th. Monday the 13th. Sorry, Monday the 13th.
No. We'll come back to this item. I'll come back to this item, thank you, and I'll get the officers to work through a suitable time.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll have to come back into public though, so that's annoying, but anyway, we'll leave that one lying on the table and we'll come back to it, but I want it sorted today.
Okay.
Yep. So I'll leave you to deal with that. Good. And it's got to be the right time that's going to suit our community. So now I'm happy to move from the chair that we go into public excluded. Could I ask the officers please to advise us why these items would be in public excluded? Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Through your worship, there are 2 items on recommended to be heard in public excluded. The first one regarding Puketapu Bridge, there's still negotiations at play with the contractor, and we're currently active contract negotiations on that one, and with the commercial transaction, a little along the same lines, there's commercial sensitivities at play with that and commercial activities, and we need to appreciate those things.
Thank you very much. Any questions on these items being in public excluded? Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Worship. Not on the items being publicly excluded. Forgive me, I'm just going back to item 9 and just making sure I understand that we are going to formalise whether or not and when an extra council meeting will be. But could we move the current recommendations to allow for meetings to be moved? Is that...
No, we'll come back to that item.
Okay.
We'll come back to item 9.
That's fine.
Including the new council meeting, the additional council meeting. Thank you. Okay, so there's no questions or comments about those items being in PX. Happy to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Apatu. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That item is carried. Now we go into PX, and welcome to Francois. Thank you. Thank you to our community who has joined us today. And it is always a pleasure to have you listen into our council meetings and hear all the great stuff that we're doing in Hiritonga Hastings.